then I can pull stuff in and out mine or.
Yeah, that's pretty smart.
So just the one, but it's like one for all, so we can go to pick that one. Oh, now I get to do this.
Yeah. I find that so many things like that now. I like that now where it's like do two.
Yep.
And then to do that one, you have to go back another step.
So
And
we
you're
like,
like,
it's
wait a
no
minute,
more.
I'm supposed to be here. I'm all the way
We're
back
just
here.
waiting on some paperwork and then we'll begin.
And this person.
Yes, you just have a very authoritative voice, so I was like. Well, good for you.
Yes, yes, another improvement, and this whole piece of equipment and probably early seventies or something like that, I would say. And so I said, hey, if this one lasts even half.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I saw that.
It's its own thing, it seems like kind of rare.
Oh, yeah.
I just realized that.
It's critical.
What I was concerned about was making sure that I remember entirely what the meeting on January 25th
I know.
was about. I know, like, signs was probably one of them. I just want to.
Yeah, I tried to. It's nice, the Marathon sign is nice, huh?
Yes, yeah.
It's a little smaller than what they got approved, I believe, because it
Yeah.
looks, it's like the proportions didn't quite work out for them. I'm like, thank you.
The cost probably went up between the time.
Yeah, right.
We didn't, and they're like, well, let's get a little smaller. I can pass it down.
And I'm printing that too.
No, I don't know.
I don't think we need to see that
I think there's only two, so.
Only two. Hi, Cecil. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Let me grab another one.
No, if you didn't print it
No,
already.
they're printing.
Oh.
Because I don't need, I read those. Good.
We did all the work, we just want to. Just kidding, 6 months. There's been days where I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, the funny thing is on this meeting is, I had plans to leave town today, then I delivered the last time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I turn on my car in the morning, the radio tells me that I have a planned zoning meeting. I go, oh, I found out from the radio that.
Phew.
Thanks, Shannon.
So that's how I found out. So I went and I said, okay, we're not leaving the Wednesday, we're going to put it over now. We're not leaving at all. Didn't matter.
All right, it is April 19th, 2023, 5:34 p.m. And this meeting has now been called to order. Mrs. Salazar, would you like to take roll call?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Mojica. We have Commissioner Mary Lowry.
Here.
Vice Chair Commissioner Tracy Quick.
Here.
Chairman Dylan Mojica.
Present.
Commissioner Cecil Hernandez. And online we have Commissioner Justin Aceveda.
Here.
Okay. We have a quorum.
All right.
Thank you.
So first item on tonight's meeting is consideration to approve the January 25th, 2023 meeting minutes.
I motion to approve the meeting minutes for January 25th, 2023 as written.
I second it.
All right, motion has been seconded. Second is the consideration to approve of the February 22nd, 2023 meeting minutes.
I motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 22nd, 2023 as written.
My second.
All right, motion seconded. And third item is commissioners shall nominate fellow commissioners for the position of chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission and motion to appoint a chairperson.
Chairman Mojica, I would like to motion to appoint Tracy Quick as our chairperson for the next year.
I second that.
All right, motion has been seconded. Mrs. Quick, the gavel is formally passed unto you.
Would it be the next meeting?
Yes, we.
Yeah, we gotta do a vote, but it'd be the next.
Yes, but we do need to call for the vote.
Okay. So motion was seconded, and so now time to call for a vote.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I vote for myself?
You can.
All right, so commissioners shall nominate fellow commissioner for the position of vice chairperson of Planning and Zoning Commission and motion to appoint a vice chairperson.
Mary Lowry is the vice, and she will accept it.
Second.
All right, motion has been seconded. Then the vice.
Call for vote.
Or sure, yeah. And now to call for the vote to nominate Mrs. Mary Lowry as vice chairwoman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, vote was unanimous.
We'll start the next meeting with the new officers.
Yeah, that's
So thank you very much.
Okay, wonderful. All
Thank
right.
you for your service as chairman.
Yes, sir. Dylan, thank you.
Good to be here, so. All righty, so next item on tonight's meeting is public hearing and consideration of rezoning case number Z-23-01. A request to rezone the residential properties located west of the commercial uses on the west side of Highway 60 between West Evans Street and West Silver Street from the C3 Central Commercial Zoning District to the TR Transitional Residential Zoning District. Dana, would you take that away for us?
I will, yes. Thank you very much, Chairman Mojica, commissioners. Perfect. This is a request to rezone. As you mentioned, or as this has been agendized, there will be a public hearing held as required by state law and our codes after initial presentation. And then we'll go into question and answer as your will. And please feel free to interrupt me at any point if you do have any technical questions or anything like that on the topic that I might be addressing. So quickly to orient you, this location that we're discussing for this rezone is shown there in yellow outline. And we'll zoom in, but I just wanted to put it in perspective relative to the geography of the highway running through there. Obviously, you see the mine and county land across on the east of that location as well. The northmost point, I will go ahead and move into a blow up. But I just want to point out that TR district on the east side, north being top of the screen, is the proposed zoning designation for that area that you see in red that's highlighted with yellow, which is zone C3. And really quickly, our C3 zoning district is our most intense central commercial zoning district, and it flanks much of the highway. It's highway-oriented type of commercial activities that we see there. That's encouraged by that zoning code. This particular properties that you'll see are actually residential neighborhoods that have, for some reason or another, have been placed in a C3 zoning. So we're proposing to extend the TR zoning, transitional residential, the blue color you see there, over to those neighborhoods that are shown there. And there's another graphic, north being now to the left of the screen. Tried to fit it all in, didn't quite get all of. So if we start from the left side of the screen, there's a large vacant parcel of land at the terminus of Evans. where it intersects with La Mesa Terrace. That parcel continues a little further to the north. But anyway, outside of that, you see again, we basically identified what was developed and utilized as residential neighborhoods for the most part. Some have duplexes. There's a couple duplexes in that area, but I don't believe there are any commercial uses as the properties are zoned um, for commercial use. So again, you see those two different areas, and it extends all the way down to Silver, I believe it's Silver, West Silver Street, which is generally in alignment with the railroad trestle, and where Broad Street goes into the downtown. So that's the area. It's about 60 lots or 50 to 60. I think it's actually 50 lots in total that are affected by this rezoning.
I do have one question. Were these houses constructed before or after the designation of C3? Were they pre or post annexation, so to speak?
Great question, Chairman, Commissioners. There are some very old homes, like pre-1900, possibly over around Barati Street. So that would have been before zoning. Zoning was established in the 1920s and began to take hold at that point. So anything prior to 1920, then I think La Mesa Terrace neighborhood, I think that was developed in the late early 50s. As well as I think over here or around Blake Street. I think more of those properties to the south are also in the 50s era.
Okay, so regardless of anything, it is what it is.
We have a 1973 zoning map that this was Zone C3. It was probably annexed from the county. And at that time, the county line was basically where this TR it was probably in the 60s actually. That was all, the blue area was in county and it was annexed into the city at some point. So my 73 zoning map shows that TR district in the county, and then apparently we annexed it and then rezoned, adopted our own zoning district for that TR area. But that C3 property, as far all the records I have show that it's been C3 as long as we've kept record on it. Hope that helps. Moving on. So what are the difference between these two zoning districts? These are the purposes and the intent as it's written in our code. C3 again is intended to provide for a full range of sales, services, and office uses necessary to maintain a vital downtown area. In this application, it's also along the highway corridor. Where the TR, the proposed transitional residential district, is to serve as a buffer between residential districts and the commercial zoning districts. So that TR district, we'll get into some of the other details of the TR, but it is a transitional district and it does allow for light office activities. But what it doesn't allow, like the C3, is retail, to all of a sudden have a house proposed and provide parking for a retail type of operation in an area that wasn't originally designed for traffic and infrastructure to support that type of use, so retail use. So we did
Currently any commercial activity going on right there?
not in any of those homes that I've been made aware of.
Okay.
Nope. And we've had, we'll get to the public input. Have not had any property owner that's been notified or adjacent to suggest that there was a commercial business going on in any of those homes. But keep in mind, in your house, even in TR, again, that allows some level of commercial activity, actually, something more compatible with residences. But also, we have our home occupation code too. So any single family home in the city is, or multifamily for that matter, does also have the ability to have a home occupation and run certain limited types of business activities out of their home. Again, it's really predicated on minimizing traffic that would impact a residential neighborhood. So this is a comparison, side-by-side comparison of the development standards of the C3 zoning district as opposed to the TR minimum lot area. The C3 doesn't have a minimum lot area. The proposed, or the TR zoning district does have a 4,000 square foot lot minimum for, I think that's for multifamily or for single family. There's a couple of different lot minimums, but why that dimension as well as the following minimum lot dimensions, where there's none in the C3, though in the TR there's a 60-foot minimum width and a 70-foot minimum depth. That's in the event that you want to subdivide land in the TR zoning district. So if you have a large parcel that you want to do a subdivision, those are the minimum standards. It would have to be a 4,000 square foot minimum lot and a 60-foot by 70-foot dimensioned minimum lot size. Now, in this situation, these are very old lots. Some are much larger. There's just a variety. They're all legal non-conforming, even in the C3 district for the most part, with respect to the setbacks that we'll get into. But again, those dimensional standards are only, the lot size and lot width is only pertinent if you're subdividing the land, which I don't believe any of these properties could be subdivided further, either in the C3 or there's none that have that type of access in size. So the maximum building height for some reason, our C3 district allows for 100 feet. Obviously, that's in a rural setting. That I think it was probably intended for maybe communication towers or something, but we might take a look at that one day with you. Typically, you're not going to see more than 4 or 5 stories, even in urban areas of the state, which is 50, 60 feet. So anyway, so we'll address that potentially another time. But anyway, the proposed TR allows solid 36 feet or 3 full stories, which is a good size for an apartment or a townhouse or something like that, which we don't really see that level of development currently in the city, by and large. And a P&Z has the ability, the way the code's written, to approve taller structures if it's warranted. Front and side yard setback, that's one of the big changes. All of our 2 commercial districts, C2 and C3, have a 20-foot front setback, and that 20-foot front setback is supposed to be in a landscaped area, with exception to the access, ingress-egress from the arterial road or the highway in the situation. The TR district, as well as our other single-family districts, for the most part, have a 20-foot building setback on the front, and that's usually your driveway with your cars in that scenario. The side yard setback is the bigger change. Currently, C3 has a 10-foot side yard setback. The proposed TR district has a 5-foot on one side and 9-foot on the other. That's what both of our multifamily districts, the TR as well as our R2 here on the north side of town, or on the east side of town. We have all R2, but that reduction in that setback is probably going to benefit every lot that's in this rezoning. Many of the lots were developed with much narrower setbacks than what the 10-foot that's currently applicable in the C3. So we're getting some homes will then be in compliance and no longer a legal non-conforming encroachment into that side yard setback. The reason this rezoning is proposed is some property owner came in, they wanted to build a bathroom addition on the side of their house, and they're at a 10-foot setback currently, and then that's when we realized, oh, you're zone C3 and you have a 10-foot setback. 2 things that are, one of those 2 things you can't get a variance for. Let's just rezone and correct the same situation for anybody else, a lot of the neighbors too. We can dissect individual lots if we get into any particulars and look at every lot's different. But that 5-foot on one side, 9-foot on the other is going to help. Is the big benefit, in addition to the allowing the use of a residence in that zoning district too. And that's one thing I didn't point out. The C3 doesn't allow it. It allows multiple dwellings, being 3 or more, with an approved conditional use permit, as you're aware. We want to look at and protect residential uses in commercial zoning districts because sometimes there's conflicts and nuisances that occur there. And that's why that CUP process is in place. Taking this to TR is going to make that a legal use in the district. Yes.
I just have one question. This is a matter of personal curiosity more than anything. Can that give a date, like would it be 6 and 8, 7 and 7, or is it strictly 5 and 9?
5 and 9, 509, and so that would be the minimum So you can give more, obviously, but yeah, 5 and 9. You might consider one day looking at 5 and 5. You just gotta look at
Yeah.
all the different scenarios. Our multifamily is the same way. It's like, in a lot of multifamily, our R16 single family, it's residential single family, 6,000 square foot lot minimums have 5 and 5. So at some point we might revisit that.
Could we, I know that's not the topic we're on, but would you make a note that, yes, we would like to revisit that in
Yes.
the future? Is that okay? Okay, great.
As well as that.
Or at
right?
least learn about it.
Mhm. I think it's an older way of looking at it.
If you have 5 on one side, you have at least 9 on the other, I guess.
In topography, which all of this area is hillside for the most part, and same with this other area, so it's hard to get that 5 and 5 too. And drain, and not have to cut too much rock to get your building in. But anyway, and then the rear yard setback's the same. Moving on, so the big benefits of this, number one, is reduce the minimum side yard building setback. Secondly, it allows these residential uses that aren't allowed in the district they're in right now. So these are legal non-conforming homes, and I'll get to why that's important in a second. It allows, the rezoning would also allow them to reconstruct and renovate their home greater than 50% of its value. So that leads me to item number 4. It's preferred by mortgage companies and homeowners insurance providers because they do the underwriting when they look at somebody selling a house or taking out a loan on a house. And they go through and look at the zoning. Is there a legal non-conforming situation? Because they're familiar that a typical zoning code requires that if you've got a legal non-conforming use, like you're using a building for a house when it's not allowed in that zoning district, then should that building catch fire and be damaged more than 50% of its value, you're then expected to redevelop it within the conformance of the code, being a commercial use. So when they're lending and or looking at underwriting insurance, they say, well, fine, we're going to loan this person $150,000 for this house, and it burns more than 50% of its value. We can't get our house back. We can't rebuild that. And that's intended. That's an intent to bring properties up to what your current standards are or allowed uses are. Well, in this situation, it's an incorrect zoning placement over single family neighborhoods. So we know that probably wasn't the intent. Was we need to convert all these houses to commercial one day, and that'll be great value to the city. I don't think that was probably the conversation that occurred. I think it was just a broad brush potentially, because like I said, the roadway infrastructure is doesn't meet a commercial level standard where you have perpendicular intersections. They're all at angles, steep slopes to get up into some of these neighborhoods and stuff like that. So anyway, that's why that's a big one. And we have a number of these little situations around the community as well. And on occasion, I do get a call from a bank or an insurance company saying, what's the story here? Because we're being asked to lend on this. And I end up writing them a letter saying, we're not looking to get rid of any homes. As a matter of fact, we have a deficiency on homes. So that's our mentality, but the code does say something. If we can clean this up, that's the best, my suggested approach and why we're here today. So finally, item number 5, it makes it easier to sell those properties because of that reason I just mentioned as a residence, and it also allows for multiple dwellings in the zoning district. 6, generally that existing infrastructure is not designed to support commercial traffic and activities. It just wasn't developed as a commercial area. And then finally, rezoning this will protect the existing residences that we have in those neighborhoods from future potential commercial use going into one of those homes. We would have a very difficult time if somebody proposed, I want to start a retail activity in my house here or in this house because I'm zone C3. Obviously, they have to provide parking and a number of other things to convert that use, but the zoning's there, and that could be concerning to some neighbors. So we held a citizen review meeting that's required by statute back on the 4th of this month at 5 o'clock here in council chambers. We advertised. Every property owner received a request as well as the property owners within 300 feet of that proposed rezone. We had about 6 members of the public, a few I see here today, and I do see new faces today. But I've been basically approached and had conversations with 5 or 6 property owners. And for the most part, it was just to understand, like I said, we didn't know this was a thing, right? How would you? So that it was more of an educational process of, this is a technicality here. We could correct this and align things. So this Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing that you hold tonight, it has also been advertised, meeting all the requirements. We posted, I think, 8 signs on the streets leading up to the properties, 8th page display ad in the newspaper, as well as mailing all the property owners twice of that own property here, and then the surrounding 300 foot at least once. So with that, staff recommends, Planning and Zoning Commission recommend council approve this rezoning request from the C3 district to the TR zoning district. And then after your discussion, or at some point, we do need to open up the public hearing and invite the public up to speak. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you have.
It just kind of comes across as common sense to me that it would be better suited in TR zoning as opposed to C3. I don't have any questions about that. I think I kind of interrupted you with my questions while you were speaking anyway, so right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so we'll give people a chance to speak by opening a public hearing. Ms. Salzar, do we have any emails or a scheduling of who's to approach in order?
No, I don't have a schedule of the attendees. Let me check online and see if I have any emails.
I suppose we'll get around to them during the public hearing as well, too. So.
Yeah, I have no emails.
Public hearing is now open. Anyone who would like to address the stand and speak their voice is free to do so.
Please step up to the microphone over here, the podium, and just state your name and address for the record. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for being here, sir.
Excuse me?
Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. My name's Lambert. Me and my wife live at 190 West La Mesa Terrace. That gentleman over there was at the first meeting, and a couple things I wrote down. Roads, La Mesa Terrace, you're lucky to get 2 cars through there coming in. That gentleman, I believe, said he drove up there and said, "Holy Moses." But as far as commercial, that y'all said something about 20-foot setback, or I know that laundry ain't 20-foot setback for anything. Does that apply, or because the residents we live is 75 years old? I mean, and
For existing structures that may be less than 20 feet or 10 from the rear or 5 and 9 on the sides, if there's any existing structure that's already within that area, it would be considered as a legal non-conforming, which is essentially grandfathered in, so to speak. I guess the problem arises, Dana, if anything existing may be classified as legal non-conforming, but if you try to do something new, that's when it must conform to the zoning ordinance.
Correct. Or if it burns down, to replace it.
yeah.
Yep, correct.
Okay. 9 times out of 10 up there, you go 20 foot, 10 foot, whatever, you're on your own. If you wanted to add something. I mean, it makes, there's Mesa Terrace is La Mesa Terrace, but it's all private land. And, I mean, our land, we own 2/3 of the street, all this, you know, if you go to the courthouse. Sure. And stuff, you know, but I guess that's whatever. And we're talking about the TR zoning, okay, to, I guess, make it right, basically from what it is now. Yes or no?
Correct. It would be a correction, right? You don't have businesses and commercial uses of your property. So we want to put it in a use that's allowed, in a district that's allowed as a residence.
And
Yeah.
Mr. Burke, I'm sorry, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to ask, C3, that's the same as Broad Street and everything,
Correct.
right?
Downtown.
So this area makes much more sense as a transitional residential neighborhood as opposed to a heavy commercial. So I would word it as basically a correction. It would make more sense for it to be in TR as opposed to the heaviest commercial activity in town.
Yes, sir.
So that's, I guess that's what I would say, it would make more sense than in TR than C3.
And my last question is, who votes to do the changing or do the vote?
So if I could,
I think, that gentleman said something about voting, yes or no.
We approve it and then it goes to the city council to.
Correct.
Okay, then it's the city council that votes yea or nay.
Next Tuesday.
Correct.
Next Tuesday, they'll have the final word on it.
Oh, okay.
in a public hearing just like this.
Yeah.
So tonight is a recommendation to city council.
Right, and you can come speak to them again on Tuesday if you want to, Lonnie.
Oh, okay, I'll be there.
Good, all right.
But, no, thinking, that's all I got. Thank you for all the help. That's all I had.
All right, well, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to approach the podium? One gentleman. Sir, if you don't mind, speaking your name and giving your address, please.
Al Nader, I run the business, 1028 North Broad Street, but I also own a house just right behind there. At one time that was used for commercial use, but it still could get, used business like office business out of the house, will that still be, because transition, can you still run a home office out of that house?
Yes,
Just no commercial, this mainly just to get rid of the commercial part of it, the heavy duty stuff.
yes, that is the difference between transitional residential and purely residential zoning. Mr. Burkhart may have more details on the exactness of all that, if you have any specific questions.
Home office, that was a home office at one time, the house I bought there. And that would still go to run a light business out of there, would still be possible.
It should still be possible, I don't know.
Should, or yes.
Is it this house right here? Oh,
What's that?
that house we've got shown right there?
West Barati?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you're right on the frontage. Yes. So you got a couple things. The TR district allows for office uses.
Okay.
So depending on what you're doing, it sounds like do you have people showing up to the house to pick up just minor deliveries, stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and there's also home occupations that I mentioned, and you're allowed as long as you don't have, the litmus is 5 trips per day specific to the business. There's a few other things regarding how you can't use more than a quarter of the house as a business. Some restrictions in that home occupation, but again, the TR allows for the office use.
And how much would the taxes go down?
You've been assessed. I was hoping that would be a good benefit, but all these properties are assessed as residential already because that's how they're used. Yeah. Well, let's double check yours.
Nice try out.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that house is residential assessment.
Hi, my name is Michelle Powell. I live at 172 Evans Street. And my concern is there's a lot on my other side. And I want to know if we're going to have like a trailer park or anything can go on.
Okay.
I think we brought it up in the neighborhood watch, but my concern is that lot is available.
You did this lot, I
Yeah,
believe?
right as you come
Yep.
around on Evans.
You're right. So at present, so this rezone, that property is currently C3, just like your house. And should council wish to, or rezone, it would then go into the TR transitional zoning district. So those C3 options would no longer be options for that property or commercial development, basically. It would be TR, again, it would be that office use or the residential, single family, duplex, or multifamily uses are allowed. So that's how that property could be developed. One thing I think you picked up on from our citizen review meeting was that the adjacent TR zoning district, the existing zoning over there, has an overlay. So that's the parcel we were just talking about.
Like right behind.
And I think the same owner owns the parcel behind it. Is it the Schminke's that own both of those, I believe?
Yeah, I'm curious to be what's going to be.
Or actually, I think the mine bought all those. I don't know. I might be goofing them up. Nope, the Browns is still on that property. So that property is already in the TR zoning district. And in addition to that TR district, this heavy blue line that you see surrounding is an interesting overlay district that was created. I don't know when, probably 30 years ago. But it's called the R1MH overlay. That's residential, single family, R1-MH manufactured housing. So that is a very unique overlay code that applies to these blue properties that is not proposed to be extended with this TR for these properties that we're discussing tonight. All right. So yeah, you could see a manufactured housing development possibly occur back here. That district, we can talk offline or another time. It's very unique in that they're trying to encourage a non-manufactured home appearance. So they have a lot of detail on how the building is not skirted. It's a finished to the ground to appear as a conventionally constructed home. So it's a unique zoning district that's not going to affect that lot that you mentioned. So that would not be applicable to this lot unless they came in and rezoned it, requested. And you as a neighbor, anybody within 300 feet would be notified, and we would hold a very similar hearing.
Okay, my concern is also my neighbors. That's our getaway up to our house, and if something goes in there, it affects all of us. It's not just becoming my neighbors, but it's a very tight corner.
It'll impact the traffic
Yeah.
at
My concern
at
is that.
Evans and the 60 for sure. So they're depending on if it was more than a single family home or a couple units, we would have to look at that infrastructure, the sight lines. There'd be a bit more to look at prior to approving.
Yeah, and all the traffic that's already associated with the laundromat, with kids running across, coming off the highway, it's already a hazardous area.
The other
So Dana, would there be a traffic study or something like that?
that could be the city could request that if it was warranted. Yep. We would involve our city engineer and our public works director in review.
And that might affect if they can.
That all just depends on what the intensity would be proposed for that. Yeah, exactly. If it's the house, a couple of units or something like that, we know that wouldn't probably warrant a full-blown traffic study. But if it's a subdivision of some sort or commercial development would necessitate a further study.
Yeah, that's my concern, because it's hard getting off the 60 already to go up Evans, let alone having more houses and kids and everything running around. That's my concern, plus neighbors.
And that's pretty consistent with about every one of those intersections that are
And
included
coming
in
down
there.
from Mesa, yeah, so we're unique. Thank you so much. That was my
Thank you
concern.
for participating.
Thank you. All right, anyone else like to come up? All right. Salazar, did we get any emails or Is there anything that, we should mention for motion to?
I actually have one question. When she brought up the mobile home park, so a mobile home park would be considered commercial, so that would have to be commercial district?
No, they're their own entity. So actually, we have a mobile home district. So to install a new mobile home today, it would have to be within a district that's zoned for manufactured housing or that R1MH. Those are the two places it's allowed. I think probably 5-6 years ago, not more, the city went through their development code, their R16, their residential codes, and said we allow modular but not manufactured homes in those districts, which is pretty consistent with other communities.
Are we already zoned like that, like the mobile home areas here, are they already zoned like that?
No,
So how
they're
do we
not.
do that too?
They would be legal non-conforming. And the idea, well, we can go down a hole there, but the idea, they function very different than a traditional neighborhood. And so we've learned over the years and decades that they tend to come with amenity spaces and things that make for a mobile home neighborhood successful. That's the difference. The older ones that have developed, right, usually there's no paving, very limited infrastructure.
So, that being said, I don't have any further questions. We move on
All right, if
to.
there's no further discussion, I motion to recommend the city council approve case number Z-23-01, rezoning subject properties to TR transitional residential zoning.
I second.
All right, motion seconded. Shall move on to a vote for the consideration of case Z-21-01. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
All was unanimous. Motion passed.
Thank you everyone for showing up.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
It's nice to see people.
So, up next is the review of regulations to address marijuana manufacturing and marijuana testing facilities. Dana, would you take that away for us?
I will. Thanks again, Chairman Mojica, Commissioners. At your last meeting, we had discussed future agenda items, and one item, I believe it was Commissioner Lowry, asked to have a discussion on marijuana manufacturing and testing use in the city. Just to get you all caught up. In 2000, I think it was about a year or 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Yeah, 2021. 2021. At this time, actually, it was about exactly 2 years ago, the city adopted a zoning code to allow for recreational adult use marijuana, which was in response to state legislation that was approved in, what was it, 2018? That to 2018 or 2020? I think it's 2018. To allow for adult use in addition to the medical marijuana that was already allowed. Well, that legislation brought in a few other things that they learned at the same, the legislators learned at the same time, which was, well, how do we address the manufacturing or cultivation of it and testing? Do we start testing? So in preparing for this discussion, I read back through all those fun statutes and our code, and I realized, wow, it was very specific. Legislation was very specific to be marijuana establishments and marijuana testing facilities. And I remember when we got into the discussion or reviewing and developing policy for the city on this, I thought, why testing facilities? Why is that so specified? And looking at other cities' codes, some cities don't allow testing facilities. So we started asking a lot of questions or digging around, and nobody could really explain. And the one thing that wasn't very explicit in that legislation was the extraction process and things that we've come to know that could be dangerous in certain situations. So people that I know in that industry and do land use, and I'm like, yeah, it's really weird. They put all this emphasis on testing because they knew they needed testing and didn't really address the bigger life safety issues necessarily. And now yeah, so that was just an interesting thing that came back to my mind when I was preparing for this. And that was my take on how the substance of that legislation. But as you see, that ARS 36/2857, which is basically that referendum to allow for adult use marijuana, did these 6 things. It allows cities to do these 6 different things. Number 1, enact regulations for marijuana establishments and marijuana testing facilities. And literally, this is verbatim out of the code. It, for some reason, specifies testing facilities. And then you see limits the number. We can limit the number. Item number 3, prohibit establishments in testing facilities. And then we've got some of the other allowances that the statutes will grant the cities to regulate.
What does, legally speaking, what does testing facility comprise of?
I will get to that definition. I do have it. Municipality may not enact a regulation or rule that. So again, this is the legislation. It says makes the operation of marijuana establishment or marijuana testing facility unduly burdensome. And like I said, you see this reiterated. This is just plain and simple. But it's like, wow, they don't even talk about. There's other things that go along with that. Like I said, extraction, manufacturing, and those things. But they're focused on marijuana facilities, and then they define it all as a marijuana establishment. All these things, cultivation. We'll get to that. And then we can't prohibit the transportation of goods to testing facilities. It's another item in there. So, and I'll get also to the manufacturing. What's the difference between adult use and recreational use? These 4 things. This is my old presentation, by the way. The beginning of this particular slide. Oddly, testing facilities, again, is one of the new things that's introduced above and beyond what the medical statute allows. And then we see the other things that this recreational statute allowed. Marijuana testing facility means, and this is ARS's definition of the Department of AZDHS, Department of Health Services, or another entity that is licensed by the department to analyze the potency of marijuana and test marijuana for harmful contaminants. Those are the 2 things they want. What's in it? What type of harmful minerals or contaminants could be in it? And what's the potency of it? Those are the 2.
Because we're actually the 2 schemes. I was going to wonder if it was one or the other or both. So,
yep, both. So then the statute also provides that lawful operation of marijuana establishments and marijuana testing facilities treat dispensaries and testing facilities as the same. Like I said, this is right out of the statutes. It also, that legislation also established a marijuana testing advisory council, which I had never heard of. I just did some Googling and saw, oh, wow. And they just met and provided their first set of recommendations in December of 2022 on what should be included in the testing procedures. And basically, what's our FDA kind of approach to what are we looking for and what's a waste of our time and how do we protect the public's health? And that's made up of like 30 different people, both in the business and then lab scientists and stuff like that. And then there is a list of all the testing facilities in the state. There's about 19 of them, and they're mostly in the urban areas, and then 1 in Snowflake because of the large facility out there. And they're third party. They have to be a third party. They can't be owned or managed in any way by a manufacturer or a dispensary. So testing facilities in Globe, this is our code. We allow marijuana testing facilities. And I recall the conversation that we had at the time with council and P&Z commissioners, knowing that, wow, so testing facilities are usually pretty lab sterile type of environments, obviously, with equipment and machines to run analysis of samples, small samples. And that's what was explained to me, us from an industry professional that came up and addressed it actually to council. He said, no, they just deal with small samples of the different batches and how if it's extracted in some way, what's that potency? And that's where they test all the different products for chemical and potency. So that's it. And they said, yeah, it's pretty benign on how they do this. So that was the approach at that time. Testing.
One of the people's concerns in some of the cities that they're worried about, could you use the word chemical and that freaks everyone out thinking that it's going to be out in the air. kind of what,
Right.
what creates people's misunderstanding, right?
Better than radioactive, I guess.
So here, and so our code is very much based off of the League of Cities and Towns developed a model policy, model code. They did that to help cities get up to speed really quickly because of the expedited process that happened after the referendum got approved. Basically, within a couple of months, if cities didn't have an ordinance in place, they couldn't restrict. They'd have a more difficult time regulating and restricting certain activities. Well, in Globe, we did it like a year later. We didn't have that luxury. But anyway, we got the chance to see how what's working in other communities and what's not when we wrote our code. But anyway, this language is pretty much verbatim. So it shall be unlawful for a person to operate a marijuana testing facility without a CUP. Same exact process as what you just went through to allow a dispensary. Same process you'd go through to allow for a grow facility. It's all approved by a use permit, through a use permit. So you would see that request come through. P&Z would make a recommendation to city council. Marijuana CUPs are the only CUPs I'm aware of that go to council. Unless somebody is not happy with your decision, they can appeal your CUP action to council if they wanted to. But outside of that, everything else you pretty much the end of the line, like I said, with exception to the marijuana here. So marijuana testing facilities are permitted with an approved CUP, like I said, in the same zoning districts. It's just the same language as where we allow dispensaries. Shall ensure access to the area of the facility where marijuana products are being tested or stored for testing is limited to a facility's owners. And this is very similar language in how it authorizes or second, shall ensure the transportation of marijuana products is in compliance with applicable law. C, shall comply with all testing processes, protocol standards, and criteria adopted by the Department for Testing Marijuana and Marijuana Products. So as you know, we just got the first set of recommendations in December, so there's going to be probably more regulation coming down from ADHS on what they're looking for in testing the product. Shall maintain the records, shall submit a written security plan. Those things we also require those for dispensaries and cultivation facilities. So that's our Globe code. We do allow them by use permit. So ARS and our zoning code both have the same item criteria. A medical marijuana dispensary includes definition includes a medical marijuana dispensary, a medical marijuana cultivation facility, a manufacturing facility, a marijuana club, and any other kind of marijuana facility of any kind. So that's their catch-all definition for this is how we term these types of businesses.
Can I clarify that?
Mm-hmm.
So marijuana dispensary, that term includes manufacturing facilities?
Yeah, but we carve ours out. Oh, we carve out our code. I'll get to the manufacturing. I've just been dealing with testing. We'll get to manufacturing.
That's fine, that
Yep.
was just.
Yeah, correct. And then, so our code, the way it's written, but it deals with them all separately.
Okay.
So ARS for manufacturing facilities, manufacturing means to compound, blend, extract, infuse, or otherwise make or prepare a marijuana product. And like I said, that's only become a real big issue because some of the extraction processes use propane and butane and things that are combustible. And there's good examples of that combusting. And I'll get to how that's being addressed or has been addressed. Manufacturing facilities in Globe, this is right out of our code. Certain marijuana establishment manufacturing and extraction processes are known to be hazardous and pose life safety concerns. So we were very specific in identifying, carving this out. If manufacturing or extraction processes are proposed as part of a conditional use permit request, the type of materials being used or stored along with the quantities of materials shall be detailed in the request and is subject to approval. And that's where we bring that into our fire department, obviously, and police department for hazardous materials review. And they have a whole protocol and everything. So when we were getting into this and realizing, manufacturing can have problems, I'll get to it. But the National Firemen's Association has some directives, best practices directives that have generally been adopted by that group. So anyway, our Globe City Code, and it continues, and this is standard language that we had to add to the medical marijuana facility because you can't regulate recreational adult use any more stringent than you do medical. So we had to go in and make a bunch of updates to our medical code, to then have it also applicable to adult use. So anyway, this is one of those areas. Basically, I wanted to highlight, in addition there too, health, safety, security, environmental, consumer, utility, industrial, cultivation, manufacturing, best practices shall apply. So when we're looking at standard conditions of a conditional use permit to apply, we go through and we've got language here that allows us to apply best practices. And this is the NFPA, safety issues for cannabis-related facilities. Get document that's been prepared. I didn't see an updated version. This is what we used 2 years ago. I don't know if that's evolved, but I know our public safety society here will continue to address any issues that are resulting from any of these processes. But yeah, so they have a guideline here that you see, and I can make that available to you. Just let me know. Be happy to email it. Yeah, but they go through and kind of identify all these various safety issues, topics to consider, and things like that to help our public safety and firemen on how they should be looking at extraction facilities and what's involved.
I'd like to take a look at that, so if you could email.
I'll send it to all of you.
Cool, okay.
All right, and then back to and then secondly, for a marijuana establishment that engages in cultivation or manufacturing shall submit a written operations plan. And here's 3 criteria that are required. I won't get into everything, but they're particular on how it's being disposed of and what pesticides and fertilizers you're using. And they want to know what all is going into that. Obviously, testing is going to figure out that as well once that product's tested, if there is an issue. So Globe's code continues here. Individual. So there is a criteria in the new legislation that allows for people to cultivate in their own home and have personal use. So we take similar measures to ensure that if they are doing that, this is all for residential application, you having your 6 plants. I believe that's what they allow you to have if you're over 21. But item number 4, individuals shall not process or manufacture marijuana by means of any liquid or gas other than alcohol that has a flash point below 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that would have come directly from statute, because we wouldn't know to write something like that. So that's basically a statute kind of giving us some teeth on what people are doing in their houses in terms of manufacturing. And then finally, kitchen, bathrooms, and primary bedrooms shall be used for their intended use and shall not be used primarily for residential marijuana processing, manufacturing, or cultivation. So that's some language to keep somebody from converting a house into a cultivation facility or manufacturing facility. All right. And then finally, we have violations. So if they do violate any of our codes there, it's unlawful and a violation of this article for a person to sell, cultivate, manufacture marijuana or marijuana products if the person fails to meet any of those requirements of this article, of our zoning code, and state law. And then finally, the 2021 marijuana text amendment highlights are listed here. And I identified 2 that we're talking about today. One of those highlights was to allow testing facilities in the city. And secondly, to restrict potentially hazardous manufacturing and extraction processes. That's a slide from 2 years ago. And then the other fun stuff there. So I know it's a lot. I'm open to any discussion or direction, how you'd like to.
Is there going to be a quiz?
And pursuing getting technical facilities here, I would think there has to be good money involved.
No, we hope, it seemed, that was the intent at the time.
And so are we advertising that Grove would be open to having testing facilities?
I don't necessarily think we go out of our way to advertise that, but it could be a good option one day.
Just like promoting growth, like the opportunity to do something like that and grow in the future.
Right, having the door open for more professional, quasi-professional.
Goodness gracious, is Snowflake doing it?
Well, they got the largest grow facility in the world, so they have to do it. So that's, I think it's that your geographic location. Who's going to be your clients? To who are you going to test? Well, out here, right? It'd be a lot of driving, I guess. But you would think that this could be a seat, or Payson at one point, because if it's getting grown up in the mountains or out in Safford or these other communities, and they're required by law to test it.
Right.
So that could be a good option in the future.
One of the reasons that I had requested that we could talk about this a little bit more is my concern about the safety hazard around manufacturing. I'm not very familiar with testing. It sounds like it's no different than Quest Labs doing medical testing. I don't know that myself. But the manufacturing of marijuana can have very, very, very serious safety hazards. And I would think that we wouldn't want that in a town of this size with homes very close together like we do. That's more of like a, put it out in the county, like Snowflake has 1 billion,
But
acres.
I think we do have a manufacturing facility.
Yes.
We already have one?
Oh, I'm sorry. No cultivation. No
Okay,
manufacturing that I'm aware of.
I thought
I
they were cooking-
I haven't seen that use permit. I don't know. It was approved back in 2012.
Cooking, making candies and stuff like that. So that would, to me, I guess, was what I consider
We'll have to
manufacturing.
look at the correct. That would fall under that definition. So I'll take a look at their.
Because I know we have grows, right, and we have dispensaries. If we wanna look at, if businesses wanna do the testing, but I wasn't aware that we already had manufacturing within the city limits, and
I
that's,
think we have one, I think, Miami has one.
Yeah.
Because I know someone that works for Miami one, and I would consider manufacturing when he talks about it.
yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I was pretty sure Miami had one. I wasn't aware of one here.
Well, I think the grow with the old board down there, I believe they've got a kitchen there, so that's manufacturing.
Either way,
Yeah,
we're doing,
yeah, that would be manufacturing to me.
that
We
would.
do have a kitchen,
Yeah,
yeah.
they have a kitchen. Because that's what, that's
I'll have to
what's
look
gonna
at
be in the
that.
dispensary downtown, is that part of what they're gonna be selling is what they're making here.
That's what I'm talking about is the chemical process to separate out the oils and then make them into gummies. The cookies you can use, what comes
Yeah,
off
I
the
think
plant.
we've already. Pretty sure.
The extraction
Yes.
process
Yeah,
is the one that
extraction,
we
yeah,
know.
They're extracting, because they're doing.
Yeah.
They're making gummies, they're making candies, they're not doing just like brownies, and even that, they cook up butters and stuff, they still, do something to make it, they don't just put marijuana leaves in it, they actually have to extract the.
Okay.
Well, I think the one thing that's probably most concerning you is the butane hash oil type of extraction, which they're using solvents and combustibles as solvents to extract.
I would point out that we live by the mines and they're doing a little worse than any of that.
I don't know any houses that are right next to the mines though.
Right across the highway from Miami.
Is that where their processing facility is though? Like, I work for one of those mines and like there's nobody who lives right next to our processing facility.
The live plant has houses right behind it.
For me, I've heard about the horrible disasters that can happen with manufacturing. I mean, these are huge explosions that can just, not ricochet, but, channel out to anything around them.
If it happens in a home, it could spread to the home next to it, so it's definitely a concern.
And that appears to be a legal activity per our code and statute. Also, with regards to manufacturing, obviously you would have to approve the CUP. There are distance separations from residential zoning. We know part of the discussion at the time, when we were looking at extraction, we know this would be a horrible idea downtown because we could lose our whole downtown, our historically significant resource, quickly. So we know there's, in my mind, I know there's definitely would be a critical look at where is this going if somebody's proposing it. And we will pull the existing cultivation facility CUP. I know all this is new stuff since that CUP was issued back in like 2012 or 2014 or whatever, because we see the legislation was catching up to some of these concerns that you're expressing. So we'll pull that out just so we're fully clear on what they are allowed to do over
I
there.
think, and that's the other thing that worries me a little about this, is that it is still a relatively new industry, which is not as tightly regulated as, you gave the example of mining. Mining has tighter regulations than any other type of industry out there.
No, I agree.
Whereas this is a new industry where they're still writing papers on it. Even the NFPA just came out with their guidance on it, and they're the leaders in the tobacco industry. So it's just I wasn't aware that we already had manufacturing going on.
Right.
And my intention was to see if we could actually, in truth, my intention was to see, could we put a stop to that and force it out into the counties where there's not as many people. But if it's already here, there's nothing I can do about it.
I think that if I recall from when the council was talking about this before and testing facilities came up, they were talking about using like a corridor route on the 60, like going out, well, actually be the 70, so.
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
And that where it's wide open, and
Yes.
you've got some rain out there. So I
Yes.
think that the city is definitely looking at that already.
Yeah.
They're aware of the people's concerns.
Yeah.
And the real danger.
And keep in mind, somebody proposes one, you're going to be the approval authority or recommending authority. So that's, location, suitability, potential hazards are all things within your purview in reviewing those requests.
Thank you.
All right.
Questions, Mr. Grant? No, self-explanatory stuff.
Right. Okay, so with that just being a review, we're gonna maybe move on to the next item.
What I've been looking forward to.
All right.
Get to it.
Presentation on parking in the downtown area, existing tools and resources available to help address parking issues and strategic planning efforts to address parking issues in the city. Dana, take it away.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Commissioners. As you all know, parking's been a topic in downtown particularly, and lack thereof at times. In recent approvals, Hill Street School and stuff, I think it brought up this discussion. Apparently, Jerry Barnes, our former city engineer and public works director, did a presentation about 2 years ago. And I took some of that information, fortunately did some of the legwork, just to give you a heads up. I do know the city is looking at and moving forward with the study for the downtown revitalization. And that would include things that are very important to downtowns, obviously parking and pedestrian access and all that fun stuff. So that could be coming in the future, but I'm just going to explain to you what we have right now and how we've addressed people approaching the city with parking concerns for their businesses. Or one, I just have one example. So the HP Overlay Zoning District is a unique code intended to preserve the historic nature of a downtown that developed before cars and things like that. And that's why it's an attraction to a lot of people, a lot of tourists in our residents. Here you see in the red, the central commercial zone with the historic preservation overlay. This is a section from our parking code, establishes that there shall be no additional minimum parking space requirements for the central commercial and historic preservation overlay. However, additional off-street parking provided shall meet our parking code standards, of course.
Can I clarify what that sentence means?
Yes.
If somebody were to come in and want to buy a building and start a business in there, in order to get permitted for that business, they wouldn't have to have a certain number of parking spaces. Is that what that means?
Correct.
Thank you.
The city's parking ordinance identifies types of uses: restaurant, bar, office, retail, grocery, office use, and here is, and then prescribes a certain amount of parking spaces per, usually square foot. Or if it's a church, it might be per number of seats in a pew. So that's common standard methodology for calculating a minimum parking standard. So this is saying, yeah, that we can't do that downtown because that nobody would have a use because we can't provide on-site parking. We're strictly reliant on public spaces, public parking, with a few exceptions. And also in our city code, the city engineer has the authority to restrict on-street parking and public parking as they see necessary. There's a full chapter on it doesn't get into any good details, but it says, hey, if the city engineer identifies the need to restrict parking in some way, he has the authority to do that. So that's how you can get into, that basically gives him authority to start limiting hours, loading zones, things like that in certain areas where we know that there's problems or something like that. And respond. So that's the existing HP overlay zone. It's pretty much a half block north and east and west of Broad Street, from the railroad trestle to Cottonwood. So that's the only area that this actually applies to. It is. This is a contemplated boundary that was established with our prior zoning administrator and briefly presented and discussed with the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission. You might have seen this. It's so briefly discussed. The city does want to expand that historic district to capture more properties, like the Hill Street School and I think Dillon's neighborhood over there, because of that significance in pre-1900 architecture. But so it could change, right? So I think when we look at parking right now, we look at this bigger area. But technically, if somebody came in, that one limited area is what is exempt from parking requirements. So this is part of the study prepared by Jerry's group, our city engineering department. The green areas you see there in the right of way show where on-street parking is currently located, and then you'll see blue areas being the paved parking, city-owned parking lots, library, Old Dominion parking lot, or Old Dominion property, here around City Hall, Mesquite, US 60 Motors, and then you see unpaved, back behind the huddle, and around the teepee, Pine Street, that little area, which I thought that was private, but anyway, apparently that's public. So that's kind of where the existing public parking opportunities exist. And there's a full-on calculation, and basically it results in about 587 spaces available in that downtown area that you saw.
Can you back up on the one before?
Oops.
Yeah, in between, there you go. There's no way there's 16 spaces in that parking lot, just so we know, that's no way. I think there's like 8 or 10 that are actually lined off, and they put no parking sign anywhere else.
Yeah, along the back wall there, and yep. So
The
by
numbers already know, right?
by no means can I validate these numbers. They were prepared. Obviously, there's a lot of effort in calculating parking spaces. But I think a more detailed study or some component would start to look at the detail, how many, compact, motorcycle, whatever else too. What is the full breadth of available parking?
Yeah, because that actually would be a good place to designate motorcycle parking, like on that one back there,
Yeah.
where it's no parking for cars, that
Right.
would be a good place to have.
A
some
narrow
parking for
area.
motorcycles. The one thing is a lot of them don't like to put their bikes out of sight.
Yeah, back in an alley. Yeah. So totaling that up, 587 spaces. At that time, the Public Works Department was interested to proceed with new updated signage, which I think they've accomplished to an extent. And I think they're still working on adding signage to direct people to the public parking spaces, parking lots, directional signage. That apparently there might have been a semi-parking issue, and that hopefully has been addressed. I know over towards Hill Street School, I've seen a semi that parks on the street regularly. Anyway, so that's one of those areas that we could look at restricting. Okay, things that commercial activities that are using that space and taking up space. And so that's something that we can consider if we need to restrict parking spaces, on-street parking spaces, assign numbers to parking lots, and better utilization of the gravel parking lots. Ultimately improving those and striping them and everything. I think would be the city's intent. Ultimately, though, I think an updated downtown plan is going to be very specific on what, in terms of parking and facilities like that, need to occur to make it a successful route. Keep it heading in the right direction. So one individual approached us when Hill Street School was going through, and I think they were being preemptive in concern of losing on-street parking spaces around their business. I said, well, how do I request restricting parking around my business? I said, that's a great question. Why don't you, shoot me an email and request that. I looked into it, saw that the city engineer has the authority to tailor parking spaces as he sees fit. So we discussed it internally and said, okay, we need some criteria. We don't have an application for this, anything like that. Let's develop criteria for which we can look at concerns and requests and identify warrants that might justify some sort of parking restrictions. And this is the list that we came up with, and this is what was provided to that property owner. So please respond let's provide a map showing what public areas, curbs you're requesting to restrict for your parking. Let's make sure we know what area you want. Provide the number of existing available parking spaces on your site. So are we fully utilizing our on-site parking spaces correctly? We want to make sure we're checking all the boxes before we're going to go down that road and get the paint out and restrict parking someplace. So we want to know that we're maximizing the utility of parking on the property and adjacent to it. Calculate your parking demand. Like I said, we have certain types of uses, but being in that if it's in the historic district, we've got that flexibility. Say, okay, well, what do you require? Justify that. Provide the total square foot area of public accessible portions of the building. That's how we, like I said, can calculate typical parking demands for a business based on their capacity for occupancy. And identify the number of employees, so we know who's coming and going. What are your peak hours of activity? Is it just windows that we need to restrict parking to 15 minutes or 1 hour or something like that to keep cars moving along? Or is it nighttime? People are just parking there overnight, leaving their car there. What is the nature of the need here? So we can define it and be very specific with our response. And then finally, provide the number of spaces. So we'll justify that when those spaces would be needed, and then provide any additional supporting documentation, explaining the problem, issues that are necessitating that request. So we just want to make sure we're very thoughtful if somebody comes to us and says, people keep parking out here, it's killing my business, we need to have some restrictions. So we can dive in, and so this is the policy that we currently have developed, just to utilize when somebody brings us something like that, a concern to the city. We want to make sure we flesh out, all avenues and understand what are those time frames and so forth. So that's where we're at today.
Question about this. Here, that's the first time tonight I've asked a question. I'm sorry. And I may be misunderstanding this, but what we've got here, this process for applying for restricted spaces seems counterintuitive to what we're trying to do with the historical area. We're trying to say, in this historical area, we're not going to designate parking because we can't afford to. We're going to have too many businesses. I mean, what's to say that, that's okay. Tracy goes, my place is hopping. I got 100 people in there every day. I need 50 spots dedicated to me. If she's the first one to apply, does she get those 50 spots because her volume and her square footage can justify it? I just am a little bit, I think this application process is in direct conflict with what we're trying to do with the historical area, which is we're not going to designate parking, because how would we ever decide who gets that designated parking? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think the initial intent here is to ask for your justification. We're not saying you're getting anything. Obviously, we have full control of that, but think about these things and explain how is this warranted because We don't. We want this to be shared and it work out, in a mixed use environment. And certain times of the day, certain businesses are busy, and other times other businesses are, and they share those spaces. That's how it should work, ideally. But no, this is putting the onus on that owner to say, yeah, show us exactly how this is impacting your business and why you need these more than anybody else around here.
It's still, if we're working with that logic, then to me, that's still encouraging a first come, first serve kind of request. And it's precluding anybody in the future that buys a vacant building now, if all the parking has already been, put into places, then whoever buys that building, there's no places for them to restrict now, because everybody else is already doing it. Does that kind of make sense?
Well, yeah, except it's not gonna happen, I think is what, because they put a 15-minute one out right by my bar, and I fought to get it removed.
Yeah.
Because no one, if either people park there illegally, or no one would park there at all, and so,
Yeah.
I just don't see them being restricted out, you just can't do it, there's just not enough parking for them. I think this is a Hill Street School thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
one of
on-
the adjacent owners.
Yeah, and it's on that highway, that's, on the street,
Yeah.
parallel parking on there, so it's a little different than the downtown.
It is, but it could set a precedent that affects the
But
rest
it
of
could
the
be
area,
done just
right?
during certain
But
hours for that one.
If I could, Jeremy. Right, we need to fully we don't want to just say, no, we don't do that for anybody. We need to understand what it is and then, make a determination. By no means is this somebody's dedicated. They don't get a contract. They don't get access to those spaces solely or whatever it is. You can't just say, unless we get into parking permits or something like that one day.
Yeah.
That's a tool we have.
Yeah.
We don't have a policy for it or anything like that, but places like City of Tempe, hey, we know that unit needs 2 parking spaces on street because they've got 4 units or something like that. So they'll actually issue permits. Colorado does that a lot around Washington downtown. So that's obviously an extreme example, but that's when, okay, there's an actual contract in that situation. That person purchased parking space to utilize or requested it. We just have to have some way to be able to evaluate, listen to people with concerns, and put it into some framework that identifies, is this a legitimate concern or not? But again, we can't say, no, this is just for you. We can just stripe those frontages. At the times we're saying, well, they're always parking there when I have my lunch stuff. Oh, okay, so there's limitation on the length of parking there or something like that. So they can have lunch, serve lunch there. And like Nerdburger, I think would be an example. And they didn't bring this up. They've got a huge vacant parcel adjacent to it that should occur there at some point in the future to possibly parking, right? But anyway, we would have to look at a lot of those details to understand and then say, okay, yeah, between 11 and 1, it's 1 hour parking or whatever it is. But instead of just saying, no, we're not even going to listen to you, we have to have some sort of, my job as a planner, okay, are there issues here or not? Let's start peeling back the layers on the onion. There's always something. And then, if somebody good, so I never got a response. It's okay, here, let's look at the justification. And usually if people start thinking about it, like, oh yeah, those are all good questions. I'm not going to justify that I get these sole spaces all to myself, and right? So who knows? But we have to have some way to listen to people and to receive something and evaluate it from our expertise of public works, planning.
I love the spirit of that, and I do. I think that makes a lot of sense the way you explained it. It's if things start to be approved, where we need in the future.
We're on the
That's my
slippery
concern.
slope.
That's all.
Yep.
I wish I led to more parking places.
Yeah.
Well, I think too also, if it's determined on a case-by-case basis, then each time a case is reviewed, there would be enough clairvoyance to see how it might affect businesses. Yeah, 5 parking spaces down the line or 5 years down the line as things develop. And if it's directly in front, maybe that's appropriate. If it's slightly adjacent, maybe it's not appropriate. So at least there's a mechanism to open that discussion, whereas not being able to have that discussion at all. I guess I would, case by case would have to be discussed.
I'll give you an example, like this is real world stuff. When Bravo opened, and we opened in Bloom's there, and the problem is between Bravo and Bloom, they each got a lot of employees. And And they were all parking out in front of all of our businesses, you know, and being there all day. So
Yeah.
we do that. Well, in particular, La Luz, one of the Laura from La Luz came to me and talked to me, she was, "You're friends with John, can you get him to tell that you can," because she says, "I'm only open from 6 to 2.
Yeah.
And those parking spots, you know, if they're not there at 6 o'clock in the morning, then they're not gonna get to the park." So we got with the city, John Angula came, we actually had a meeting, we all sat down, we talked. Chef John said one of his concerns was, because he said, "Well, why do you, no one's using that parking lot in the back?" Well, the lights were all out. So John Angula got in touch with APS, and APS did the lights, now people park back there.
Yeah.
That, you know, everyone's, you know, removed, no one stays in the, no one picks the same spot every day and parks in front and blocks that every single day.
Yeah,
And it made everybody as happy as they could be with what parking they have.
yeah,
So a lot of it just takes people sitting down and talking and trying to figure out how to work with each other.
agreed, absolutely agreed. Again, just to be clear, and then I'll drop it, it's when we do start approving these requests that come in, and those approvals start to pile up, parking is a finite resource at this point. So you have to kind of see, okay, well, who got those spots and who's gonna need them in the future, that's all.
From staff's perspective, I think if we did end up getting in a situation like this, oh yeah, they've got good warrants, and we would probably want to bring a policy forward for council to ultimately approve and say, this is how we're gonna potentially address this.
Okay.
And that's gonna be a heck of a public
Yeah,
hearing.
I think one thing I'm just glad wasn't mentioned was the idea of parking meters. I've been here my whole life, and I'm not about to start paying that.
Yes, I used to have them.
You know, I even remember that.
Yeah, I know.
I was thinking about it, but I didn't want to mob riot, so I didn't say anything.
It's a bad word. That's a 4-letter word. You didn't hear me say it. You know that's an option
We
too.
want parking garages.
We have parking garages.
And there's been talk about parking structure, obviously, as well. Somebody did a sketch.
Yeah, I mean, that's how.
There's a,
Yeah, downtown Gilbert Street.
oh yeah, we should put a big structure up,
They're in
exactly.
the same boat as us, with no parking.
All the historic downtowns, in very similar scenario, at some point in their life, they happen.
Did you get all your questions answered, Tracy?
God, I know we're not gonna restrict parking.
Thank you, Dana, for those important updates, appreciate it.
All right, we all set on the parking issue, Dan?
Absolutely. If everybody's good with the current path, and hopefully we'll see something in the future here and more downtown study and have update, and but it's been thought of, obviously, and we were prepared to the extent that we can be.
Do you have a ballpark idea when that Silver King building is knocked down, how many spots that would be in that area for parking?
No, it's a good question.
Because I mean, that's a pretty good chunk right there. It's not gonna solve all of our problems, but that would be nice. If there's someone drive to the building or something, so yeah.
Isn't Silver King where those murals are?
Yes,
So they're gonna take down those murals soon?
yeah, I think that was just to kind of beautify it temporarily, because I think the cities, yeah, they are fun. Just not to say they couldn't be utilizing that parking area to do something.
Something else, yeah.
Something else, because that was fun, and it was a fun community thing when everyone did it.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so future agenda items and scheduling of meetings.
I have nothing, no applications pending right now. Nothing pressing. Yeah, of course. Now I'm gonna go answer my emails and have a few for you. But no, HVAC's pretty busy. We got a handful of signs and stuff, but it's all HVAC, nothing oversized. So as of now, you're probably looking at a meeting in May. And it might be mid-May, so I'll take a month off, possibly. Don't, like I said, yeah, nothing. And if you guys think of anything in the meantime too, or want to dig in any other topics, or anything, just let me know.
You're in the meeting.
Are you open to the floor? I just wanted to do a shout out about your parking you're doing here.
I would not be opposed to,
Please, that was on the agenda.
okay.
It was on the agenda.
We don't have to formally open the hearing, right?
No, it's not a
We don't
hearing.
have a,
It's just called, or not even called a public. Yeah, could please step up
I'm
and
just opening my mouth.
name.
We
and
appreciate
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Save the best for last. Pardon? Save the best for last, right?
Yeah, I could talk for an hour. I'm Doug Schubert, I'm part of the HVAC committee. I worked a lot 25 years ago for the town of Tombstone. They had all the parking problems. You're historic, they're historic, and the way they fixed it was, of course, you weren't gonna be able to do it here, but we used stagecoaches and buckboard wagons to take people around town.
I rode on one of those once.
Yeah, fun, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you bet. So, but one of my thoughts would be, you have a lot of parking lots that are kind of being used, but really not. And, just try to direct, get people directed to using the parking lots or at least the employees, like you're talking about, with our businesses. And then, have like shuttles, but make them entertaining type shuttles. Not just a taxi cab or a Yugo or whatever they are. Use it, so like for your tourists, those people can give talks about the town, how, its history and everything else. And then, have one or two for each parking lot, and then others are cruising town to pick people up and take them to the next, destination or back to their car. Anyway, I just wanted to make that as a suggestion rather than wholesale modify this beautiful town. And, that's kind of it. I'd be glad to talk to people more about it.
I think one of the goals that they talked about tonight was to update the signage to direct people towards, utilizing the other gravel parking lots. So I think that they're working on trying to direct people to using the other parking spots that are available.
Right.
So I know they're working on that part of it. The second part is, does low downtown generate enough traffic to do something like that?
I can tell you with some of the businesses, the Okie Dokie in this marijuana store down here. I don't know, I've got my son, which has the same name as me, if you Google it, he's one of the major players in the Oregon State Police. And, everything that's going on in Portland, Oregon. A lot of those reasons is that they're keeping the police out of the town. The mayor and the governor doesn't let the Oregon State Police come in there and help clean up things. But he's an encyclopedia on the history of marijuana and what it's done. And it's gonna be big, And like I've talked to a couple of homeless about it, and they said, oh, there's no parking, that's fine, we're gonna be walking and using bicycles, I think. So, but, you're gonna have a big increase when that opens up. Almost right away. Anyway, thanks for hearing me.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Doug. Pleasure to meet you in person.
Yeah,
Shane, sorry I didn't recognize you.
before you leave, I wanted to ask you about HVAC.
All right, you got it.
All right, now try to get it.
There's nothing further. I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion was seconded. Tonight's meeting is now adjourned.